So, Sam, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm going to read a little blurb about Sam. Some of you here might have actually read his magazine articles. They are spectacular and colorful and rich and vibrant, and the characters leap off the page cinematically. And so he's written for a variety of national magazines, including Harper's, the New York Times, Washington Post, Rolling Stone. The revealer in an interview said that he has a particular talent for telling stories about complicated people with a kind of lucid nuance. Longreads calls Sam's reporting fascinating, gonzo, and empathetic at the same time. The Society of Features Journalism, in an award announcement, said that Sam and his work are deeply reported and well-written profiles of fascinating religious figures, and as a collection, they reveal as much about American spirituality as the individuals themselves. And it's true. I mean, and Sam and I have had a number of conversations over the past couple of days and last week, that whatever movement we are in right now, Sam, is very emblematic of America's past, but maybe also its future. How are you seeing that in your work? You know what, I'm going to take a step back. Okay. Sam, what is a cult?
Cults, they sell books.
Ah.
They're on your Netflix queue. They are source of sort of lurid fascination. As a category, I have to sort of do due diligence here. That is like the academics, if there are any, in the crowd, or if they ever listen, they would say the cult is this pejorative we use to describe anything we don't like. We say, it's not your reading group or your church. It's always the church across town that is doing some sort of odd religious thing. Okay, I'll continue doing my thing.
The TV guy's going to jump in here. Hold on, I'm just going to lift your mic up. Oh. There you go. Hold on.
Are you authorized to do that?
I am. I think no one's calling HR today, right? How about now, ladies and gentlemen?
I'll continue.
Better?
Okay.
That's actually why they invited me, because of my facility with microphones and TV stuff. Yeah.
Where was I? Cult is this it is this hard to pin down thing, definition-wise, much like religion itself, I think. But it is, I'll say this, that at their most generative, we can think of these upstart religious movements as, another way to look at it is anything in its young stages can look strange or unformed. The Mormon Church, various Pentecostal upstarts, any sort of invention or innovation can look uncomfortable. And I think the most sympathetic read of what we would call cult is that it is kind of a new religion in its early stages. This question of harm, or what the dangerous aspect of cults themselves, no group is kind of immune to doing bad, whether they are an established religious group or something more small.
How many cults have you visited in America? And so when I guess we talk about cults, we're talking about small organizations that are in some ways a collective brought together by some common belief or aspiration.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, that I have had a general practice when I can of visiting a new place of worship or community almost like every weekend if I can. This is one of the greatest things about writing about religion, is that generally the doors are open at least one day a week, maybe a couple days a week, maybe once a year. And if one goes in curious and open-minded and generally respectful, the doors do open. There are notable exceptions to that I probably won't mention here. I say nothing, but
Is that because we're going to get sued by the...
maybe.
The church that shall not be mentioned.
Exactly. But,
You're literally afraid of even saying the word Scientology.
No. Olivia, if you do hear this, return my emails. Let's hang out soon. No, I've spent time with Scientologists, and I'll go most anywhere. I lived in New York for many years, and as I said, like had a weekly habit of going every weekend to small churches, tabernacles, faith healing services, really anywhere that I could go. And this would sometimes be for stories, but often, a big part of what I do really is what we call gathering string. So I'm just gathering material that, maybe is for my own context, maybe leads to a story, maybe doesn't. And Gay Talese, the great nonfiction writer, talked about the art of hanging out, and anthropologists have a similar sort of like ethnographic approach of hanging places, and that's a huge part of my practice. So when we talk about how many cults have I visited, or how many upstart groups have I visited, again, it sort of depends what we think of as a cult, but also I'm not sure if I could really keep track.
So, Sam's girlfriend? Lily?
Yes.
Significant other, Lily, is here, who is wonderful and lovely. And she invited Sam to a wedding of one of her friends in upstate California. Was it Humboldt County? So anybody know anything about Humboldt County? Yeah. Right? What's in Humboldt County? Pot, maybe some psychedelics, and cults. So Sam goes with Lily. She invites him to a wedding. On the way back from the wedding, Sam's like, do you mind if we do a detour? And what do they go visit? And it's not a pot farm, and It's not a romantic getaway.
Well, I thought it was kind of romantic, but yeah, there was like an ashram or a monastery that I knew of, like a New Age monastery run by a white guy who claimed to be a reincarnation of I think it was Jesus, Buddha, Enoch, probably a number of others. And had built these domes on top of a mountain, and there was like a monastic order of his there that I wanted to visit. It was on my map. If you pull up my Google map, it's like littered with to visit dots. Probably on the way back to LA today, I may try to go to some. And this one was on the list. And I didn't know what I did write something about it eventually, but I knew I wanted to visit. We had to send pictures of ourselves ahead of time so that they could like read our auras and decide whether we could enter, whether our vibes were good. And
How was your aura?
I mean, we passed. I mean, I also wondered whether it was like collateral, like they were keeping images of us. I don't know. But I got a thumbs up from Lily. We looked good in the photo. And so we go behind the gated compound, drive up the top of the hill, are asked to put on these kind of white linen robes, and we laid under crystal pyramids and listened to soundscapes made by their guru, their shaman, and then there wasn't really a hard pitch. I don't think it was just like this is how awesome our music is. This is the shaman wasn't there himself. I think he lives probably somewhere nicer than that.
So he doesn't live in a yurt in
I don't think
hills
so,
of Humboldt County.
But there were some Teslas there, I think, belonged to him. As any self-respecting shaman has some Teslas, and made by our real shaman. Talk about
cults.
Exactly. Talk about cult of personality. These are the real powerful cult leaders. Not these sort of minor cults out in the hills, but the bigger ones. But and then we went our ways. The gates opened and we left. And I think it's something that I think that Lily has gotten this impression from me from doing this sort of hanging out that these are not like unsafe places to go generally. These are not brainwashed people necessarily. They're up to strange things at times, but they, one can dip in and dip out, and sort of be a voyeur, and I sort of defend the position of voyeur in some ways. Of that is, you can observe, you can engage kind of casually with these movements.
You know, it's very interesting. I think a lot of us, when we hear Sam's stories, we're like itching for some of the granular detail of the weirdness and like, okay, where you were indoctrinated and when was the orgy, right? Like, where?
Well,
but
I mean,
Sam is so unbelievably non-judgmental. Like that's part of the work that really draws out the characters, is that he's not there to judge them, and he doesn't judge them. We want a little bit more judgment.
More judgment.
But I think you started going on the judgmental path when we were talking about the other cults.
Oh.
And I was going to segue a little bit later into that, but we might as well do that now. So speaking of New York and Western New York in the early part of the 18th century was the cradle of the first great awakening in America, revivalism and religious awakening. Some of it happened, again, nearby in the early 19th century. And from your work, we talked about it the other day, it seems like we are in the midst of another religious awakening in America. And what you've been experiencing is sort of the rise of revivalism again in churches around the country where people are drawn by these very charismatic speakers who do all sorts of things, including, this is a big one, exorcisms, taking demons. There's a lot of talk about demons and evil spirits that they're trying to bring out of their congregants.
Yeah.
And one of the churches that you actually went to work for a period of time was a church in, was it Nashville or in Tennessee?
Yeah, outside Nashville. Yeah.
Outside Nashville, run by a pastor named Greg Locke. So can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah. I mean, the kind of like the demon hauntedness of the...
Well, first of all, how'd you get the job at the church? And what were you doing? And you actually, like, it's not like you went to go report. He actually joined the team to become a member of the staff.
Right.
And they knew that you were you.
That's right. I was not undercover or anything. Yeah. Let me speak quickly, like kind of revivalism itself. And yeah, I mean, something that I've observed in my reporting is revivalism is like an American tradition. And on the one hand, we have to sort of be suspicious of the revivalist claim that we have sunk into this this godless place, and now we need to return to the faith. I mean, how to put it? I mean,
the rise means that something has fallen.
Yeah, you must first do a Jeremiad or describe a lapse in religious observance in order to call for new religious awakening. But I mean, in my time in the field, hanging out with people, going places, I do think that that 2020, that the long arm of the pandemic, it's going to be hard to know exactly all the ways that changed how we organize. A lot of things that had happened in person were happening more online. And so this whole cohort of revivalist entrepreneurs who I was sort of following, I saw their sort of mediated charisma. The term I used when we were talking on the phone was, and this is a line probably will make it into my book someday, but is a burned over district, which is what they called the upstate New York, of the Instagram squares, or a burned over district on the TikTok scroll. That is, what we're seeing is all sorts of diverse revivalists doing their thing. Among them were this group of exorcists, demon exorcists. And chief among them, or a new entrant, was this guy, Greg Locke, who had a big tent revival ministry outside Nashville.
Literally tent, right?
Yeah, a literal tent, yeah. I mean, the tents blew over, they put up new tents, and this one it sort of stretched the definition of tent. It was quite established, but it was tent. And, the revivalists liked the tent stuff. It's nostalgic. There's no sawdust, but you can almost smell the sawdust. Nostalgia is a big part of religion and of the religious pitch, I think. But I knew that this media aspect of what they do, they were filming everything. They were filming the people having exorcisms. They were filming demons manifesting, people going into convulsions, speaking in demonic voices. And then, of course, being saved, the demon being cast out, is a necessary part of what you're filming. You don't just want the demons. But I said, this is really good. As a media maker, as a storyteller, they're really good at what they're doing. They are artful in their craft. So I want to write about their media. I want to go work for their media arm. And that's the pitch I made to them. I said, you guys are putting out movies about this. You are live streaming. Can I come and embed in your media team? I'm a journalist myself, and I respect, on some level, I'm curious about what you're up to. And so they didn't pay me. I wasn't hired. I wasn't.
Okay.
I'm not going to get a W-2 from them or something. But
No 401ks with the Exorcists.
No, there are some ethical boundaries that but no, they were game. I mean, they saw the appeal. They saw how they might benefit from welcoming a journalist in as well. So I worked for about a week for them as they staged a mass revival. I was backstage with the Exorcists.
Pause. I was backstage with the Exorcists.
Yeah.
So they have a team of exorcists, because
So-
one isn't enough. Given the number of demons, people.
Yeah, it's like a super group, and it's like, say, a conference like this, like maybe one of the writers, you don't know that other writer, but the big names here. Oh, Brian Williams here. I'll come to that.
He exercises big demons, Brian Williams.
I mean,
He gets the biggest demons.
He might. I don't mean. Yeah, maybe he has some in him too that need to be exercised.
So is everybody else wondering, like, do the exorcists believe that they are capable of actually exorcising demons? Like, do they believe that the demons exist and that they are actually extracting them from the bodies and souls of the
Right.
congregants who show up there?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an unsatisfying answer to that, which is, I don't generally questions of sincerity are really important. How I adjudicate whether someone is a charlatan, a pure showman, and unfaithful in their deep down beliefs it's just methodologically, I think about it, it's a really hard one to adjudicate. That is, even if that person is, if they don't believe it, they're casting out a demon, and the person there who is having this experience is transformed, does feel delivered. I've had conversations with people afterwards who feel fully kind of freed of whatever ailment it was. And let me just say something about the kind of ailments people are going to these deliverance ministers for, and it runs the gamut. It's, it might be, my leg doesn't work, but it might be, I can't sleep at night. I'm depressed. I have ADHD. I have IBS. I have, a generational curse on my mother's side from 3 generations ago, intergenerational trauma. It speaks, there's a line in the piece, it speaks to our very therapeutic age, like the problem. So if a person afterwards can feel somehow released, that also is data for me if I'm thinking about what is the scam here, and can someone have a sincere or a moving experience participating in a scam?
So what you're saying is, to some effect, if the snake oil heals, then it doesn't really matter sometimes, and that there is a benefit that the patients derive from it. There's also something else that you mentioned just now that I think is broader, and I want to sort of start to broaden out a little bit. And that is that these revivals, like bringing a lot of people into a tent and having what is essentially a social experience,
Yep.
a community experience, is a salve for one of the true great ailments of American society today, which is
Loneliness,
isolation
right.
and loneliness,
Yep.
by providing community.
Yeah.
And that is definitely something that this revivalist movement
Absolutely, yeah.
is
I think
catering to.
Right. I think it's telling also that what the pandemic did. That is if we're thinking of times of it's a funny way to think about it, mass isolation, right? We're all isolated together. It's actually kind of a shared experience people had. But if this atomized, isolating, time period is what created a opening, an avenue for for people to gather in new and exciting, or maybe old and new, in exciting ways. And this includes people defying lockdowns, which is a big thing I wrote about as well. Greg Locke was one of them. Before he got into deliverance ministry, demon stuff, there was so much thrill around gathering despite the mask mandates. And yeah, that great warmth, that feeling of, maybe not literal warmth, but sometimes literal warmth of people being together, it's hard to overstate what that does for people.
Oh, so that actually filled two roles, right? So on the one hand, people were defying orders that they maybe felt were unfair and were infringing upon them. And on the other hand, it cured this ailment that they were experiencing, which was loneliness.
Right.
Right? And there's also something about the brashness of these pastors like Greg Locke.
Yeah.
The fact that they are iconoclastic, that is very similar to the leader of the nation right now. And there's a symmetry between the two. Loud, brash, well-spoken, vastly entertaining.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's something that you can't deny that Donald Trump is. You watch any press conference that the president has, and it's riveting. You don't know where it's going to go next. You don't know what he's going to say. Let's buy Gaza. Okay, let's, something else. And people are entertained by it. And there is value to that. And that seems very similar to what you've been seeing across America in these churches and the revivalist movement with these very charismatic church leaders and pastors.
Yeah, Trump certainly has, and I'm not the first to observe it, but like the Borscht Belt timing. I mean, he's doing stand-up. And in a sort of a gauche kind of New York ethnic way. Too.
Gilded elevator way, yeah.
Like it's the wrong kind of, well, at least now. I mean, he was not the wrong kind of wealth some time ago, but now it kind of is. But even, I mean, others have noticed or noted his kind of televangelical style, and it's no surprise that he's actually surrounded himself. His religious advocates do hail from these same circles I'm reporting on. That is, it is not the religious right of yesteryear. It's not Billy Graham with a kind of respectability politics. In fact, it is these prophets, self-proclaimed prophets or kind of upstart prophets who actually, and Greg Locke is a major Trump supporter. Paula White, Trump's spiritual advisor, hails from these same circles. So there's both like an aesthetic similarity, but also like a material connection that he actually does draw from these crowds in terms of like as religious surrogates. That is, the leaders of these communities have like material connection to Trump. And I guess the bigger story also here is this like general rejection of institutions, this is kind of an interesting place to talk about that because, it's been a theme throughout conversations that I've observed here at this conference today, or this week. But the churches that I'm spending time with, a revivalist almost by necessity is calling out the church. The church has done something wrong.
It's a rejection of the establishment.
Exactly. So that's another kind of similar ethos. That is, like, something isn't working. The establishment is not working. We need to go back to something earlier or something kind of early, something old and new at the same time, and reject what it is that we've been given. The institution has failed us.
Do you ever ask the congregants, just staying on the Trump theme? Do you ever ask the congregants at these revivals, the worshipers? What they think about Trump, and people are deeply religious.
Yeah.
We're talking about a man who, when he was sworn in, did not put his hand on the Bible.
Right.
Who has had some issues with, affairs and words he said about women, and various other things that religious leaders in yesteryear might have looked down upon.
Sure.
How do they view that now?
Yeah. So I'll talk about a story I wrote for the New York Times about a author in New Jersey, a minister, a pastor slash rabbi slash best-selling author in New Jersey who wrote these kind of page-turner, almost like John Grisham religious, I mean, really they're in the tradition of like Hal Lindsey and Left Behind, if we have like evangelical readers here. And he writes these books about current events and how prophecy is following patterns of the Bible.
Jonathan Cahn, right?
Jonathan Cahn, yeah,
Wayne,
right.
New Jersey.
That's right, yes. And Jonathan Cahn, the newest theme that he had landed upon was that Trump was foretold in prophecy, that Trump's rise was like Jehu. This makes Hillary like Jezebel, which was
By the way, this was
resonant.
before the second administration.
That's
this was in
correct.
like 2018, 19.
Yep, that's right. This is 2019 that story came out, but he'd been writing them prior to that. So it was first time around.
He was one of the first people to say that Donald Trump's presidency and possible future presidency was ordained by God. And
yeah, he's certainly one of the chief ones. I mean, there is like a whole constellation of like-minded characters in his orbit who embrace this idea of Trump being prophesied. So okay. I mean, your question is how do they think about him? That he's anointed. That he has a messianic anointment about him, but are aware of failings as well. And I mean, the idea of a broken vessel being used for God, right? This is an old trope, and I don't mean that like trope as in it's like do away with it. I'm just saying it's resonant. So the idea that someone has failings and that makes them, we shouldn't root for them. None of us really totally hold to that. So I visited this church. I spent a lot of time with Jonathan Cahn there. Spent time with congregants, and
the place is still called Beth Israel of Wayne, New Jersey, and it's a church. It's sort of
it's kind of messianic. If there are people who know kind of messianic Jewish things, or
Jews for Jesus.
Jews for Jesus they are a separate organization. Should Jews for Jesus be listening? But
along with the Church of Scientology, they're all listening.
Yeah, I know all these guys, and so. Yeah, people were continuing to be excited by Trump and what he does, and his kind of thumbing the nose at establishment politics. I mean, it's all thrilling, and
it's thrilling to thumb your nose at establishment politics.
I think so, yeah, and I think there's a thrill that people feel in watching him do that. And then there are also clear things that he's done that interest the religious right, such as Israel things, abortion things. And that, there's sort of the regular kind of politics that we recognize as like policy politics, that he's appeasing the religious right. But I also think there's just like an aesthetic, a entertainment quality that is consonant with the Pentecostal charismatic movement.
Okay, so has anybody here been to a revival, religious revival of any kind? Yeah? You have? There's a man in the back nodding very enthusiastically. Can you tell us a bit about what that was?
Okay. Fantastic.
What was it like? So there's a man in the back who said, I don't know if you can hear. Can you hear? He grew up Southern Baptist and went to quite a few revivals in his youth.
Sure.
More Billy. The what revivals? Tame. No exorcisms?
So no kind of Holy Spirit, no speaking in tongues, or?
Well, not speaking in tongues, but there was a lot of people coming to the front.
Sure, altar calls and, yeah.
So maybe you could, maybe you can describe what it's actually like being, because I actually have been to one Messianic revival in Namibia, weirdly enough, but that's a different story.
I mean, probably not. Probably similar.
It actually may be. But so describe to people what it's like to be in the tent, I guess. I was going to say the room, but the tent is a more.
Yeah.
How many people? What is the experience? Are you feeling the energy that these people are feeling? Because something's happening there to make people feel in a way that most of us never get to feel, right? There's an ecstasy that I think is very appealing.
Sure.
And that many of us seek, and I wrote a book, and part of the book was about anxiety and panic attacks. And one of the methods that I used to to get through and to deal with my anxiety and the underlying pain that I was experiencing that caused the panic attacks was psychedelics, which put me at times into a state of ecstasy. And so it's hard to reach and sometimes very enlightening when you get there. But these people are getting there without having to take traditional medicines, right?
Or untraditional, yeah.
Or maybe that is, but it's nothing that they have to ingest, except the Word of God.
Yeah, I mean, that I know of.
So
there's all sorts of cross-genre stuff going on that, I wouldn't count it out.
But can you just put us in the room for a second?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you said, like, many of us have not experienced it, and I like that you actually then volunteered an experience that maybe would be something similar.
I hadn't remembered.
Right.
It was 25 years ago, and I just didn't remember it until we talked about Messianic and sort of the tamer version. So,
but I would say that probably people have, whether they have been to an actual revival or other types of gatherings, I am going to describe it, but there are commonalities. But on the one hand, there's going to be a lot of really good music. It's going to be, Greg Locke. I should say I'm describing a particular revivalist ministry, and even we have a Southern Baptist revival experience is going to be a different thing, and even within the Pentecostal world, this is like a mixed race revival. But there are different denominations of charismatic or different expressions of charismatic worship. So things will be different, but across the board, there's going to be praise and worship, really good music, songs people know, lyrics on stage. So
meaning
you can sing
you can
along.
see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I described it as they're it's like karaoke lyrics. If anyone goes to an evangelical church, that's just conventional. That's not that surprising to have it's the hymnal. The hymnal's behind you, and the hymnal is recorded by. These songs are really good. It's like pop music. It sounds like I don't know what. Sounds like pop radio, and I don't mean that in a bad way. These are really highly produced music, big studios like Hillsong and Bethel and other Spotify available worship songs that people might listen to elsewhere. So they're going to a concert where they're hearing, it's a cover band, but they're hearing songs they know well, and they're singing along, and it's very atmospheric music. It's putting you in the mood. It's Deadhead. You're going to the Grateful Dead show. You know the songs. You're hearing versions of them. You're with other people who know it. You're singing along. This is exciting. This is
How many
community.
people typically in the tent
So,
at a Greg Locke event?
At the Greg Locke, this was probably in the thousands. In the sort of the big tent and then an overflow area. Over the course of that weekend, there were 10,000 people who came. And there's people streaming.
So
too.
we're talking about this is like concert size event.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are bigger revivals than that. This is like, Greg Locke is trying to do something a little down home with a tent too. There are people who fill out stadiums for revivals too. So it's a concert, and I say that also to appeal to the crowd here. People, if a revivalist heard that, they might think, oh, I'm saying it's like, crass entertainment, but. It is like that as well. So you have music, you have testimony, you have speaking from the stage about what the minister's own testimony from others, testimony from other worship leaders, and then ultimately, if it's these Pentecostal charismatic stuff, you're going to have demonstration of miracles of some kind. Whether this is kind of one-on-one faith healing. Which would be like, I see in the crowd here somebody who's, it wouldn't be funny if I started doing this. Who in here?
Who are we?
I'm sensing, no, I'm not going to do it. It's too, but I could almost. It's like pain in your right knee. Probably somebody here has pain in their right knee, or deeper than that too. You might do that sort of, one-on-one. Someone might come up and then have an experience where they also testify in front of the crowd. At the exorcisms or this deliverance ministry I'm talking about, it's actually what they call mass deliverance. So Greg Locke is up there on stage with a microphone and he's saying, demon of perversion, demon of depression, demon of ADHD, Leviathan, maybe some old school ones. Leviathan, I command you to come out right now. So it's sort of everyone's getting the diagnosis all at once, and you sort of pick. If you're doing it on a scale that size, you can't really go one-to-one, or you're there for hours.
And so how many of the people are being exorcised?
Hard to know, because sometimes it might be sort of a quiet, the demon might leave easily. But some
You don't want to hold on to your demon.
But
I mean, it's really much more painless if you free the demon easily.
So people might, it might actually, so it might be a very, you might just sort of lean back, fall a little bit.
So the Jewish father in me is concerned about, if we're having hundreds or thousands of people experience this, all of the falling.
Don't worry,
And,
they're helpers.
Oh, they're helpers.
Yeah.
So they're catching people who are falling.
And this is some of the work that I was doing also, was actually going around and helping as people are falling. And so.
Also, you don't want a litigious crowd when everybody's falling.
Right. Yeah, right. And no one's signing release, though. There is there were notifications on all the doors saying, by coming, you're consenting to being filmed, much like probably people who came here. So content is being created, as always. And
so people are falling.
people are falling,
having
and
these...
some people in some of the exorcisms really are quite involved. That is, you have the mass call for demons to come, but then you need 3 or 4 helpers, deliverance team, to come and minister kind of more quietly, more privately, say, and the demon might then start to vocalize, to speak. So the person might speak in a different voice and say, I'm not coming out of her. She's, we had this, at age, 15, I had this experience, and they will sort of begin working through whatever the thing is. And the deliverance team, become like impromptu therapists, right? This is what they're doing. And they're saying, no, like, forgive, you have to forgive yourself, you have to let this thing go, and then the demon might continue talking and say, no, I'm not going to today. And it can go on for hours, that stage of the exorcism or of the deliverance. And I've seen ones that are very fast. I've seen ones that go on and on and on and become quite physical, the person thrashing or throwing things. It's not like... the heads are not turning, and they're not
levitating over
projectile vomiting, but people do like expel. They do like cough. They might sort of spit. They are like expelling things.
It is hard to judge. It's hard to judge people's experience, and it's hard to judge the results, because it really does sound incredibly therapeutic if you are a person who is expelling their demons and whatever happened, and that there is a group of people there to facilitate this experience,
right,
and to help them with therapy through it. It actually sounds, in some ways wholesome and lovely. If you are able to be cured of whatever it is,
right,
by believing that you are being exorcised of a particular demon that has haunted you,
right,
since you were 15 or whatever.
Right.
It's hard to judge that.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, kind of for kind of the full picture things here, to kind of just render some of the critiques also of these guys is like, many of the ailments would be things that probably we wouldn't identify as ailments in this milieu. Sort of different sexual attraction, different gender expression. So like it does fall along kind of cultural lines.
And will people articulate that?
Yeah.
Will they say, I'm attracted to men and...
Yeah. Demon of homosexuality, demon of transgender would certainly be demons that would people be seeking to expel.
And they feel comfortable enough to talk about the demon of whatever of homosexuality in front of that crowd?
I mean, if it's on its way out, maybe.
What if it comes back in?
Then,
wow.
I don't know. So yeah, just to fully render, less I kind of am working to evangelize to a whole crowd, just to give a sense of people's kind of cultural orientation is going to be what it is. Yeah.
It's so interesting. So come back to explaining how this dovetails with this current moment in American politics, right? In many ways we talked about it. A Trump rally is almost a revival, right? People come, they assemble early, they come to know the other members of the crowd because they've been to other ones. There is a similar phraseology. There is a call and repeat. There is waiting and then having the ecstatic moment where the lead preacher will come and entertain them and fill them with the ideas that they've heard before, but they're going to hear again, and there's something about the repetition that they really like.
Right.
But there's also something about the rejection of the establishment that is a key element.
Yes. I mean, I would say that political rallies, all political rallies, owe something to the revivalist tradition. And that's a kind of a historical argument that I am not totally equipped to make, but that, the way that political rallies function, I would say the DNC had certainly qualities of a revival experience too. So it's not just unique to the MAGA crowd. At the same time, there is that particular, resonance with these types of ministers that I'm spending time with. But I would say that the DNC has its own revivalism. Obama certainly had a messianic anointing of a kind of a historical anointing of fulfilling certain prophecies of the the democratic dream.
There were people who accused Obama of also taking on the cadence of a preacher at times.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So religious cadences, rhythms, and traditions I think are in our politics, whether it's Trump doing it or somebody else.
Okay.
But the the appeal of so I'll say something about the decline of institutional religion in America, which is there's lots of numbers to support this. The de-churching of America. At the same time, we have other numbers that one can point to. The number of Americans who call themselves spiritual but not religious is 70% or 70% of Americans call themselves spiritual, but not religious might be something else. And the type of Christianity I'm describing, these Pentecostal, charismatic, upstart churches, are really the growth sector in American evangelicalism. Majority of young people who go to church go to Holy Spirit-filled churches. So we have, on the one hand, a secularizing country that's leaving the institution of religion, but you have interest in non-denominational religion or sort of alt-spiritual, alt-religious practices. And figuring out that sort of paradox there, or watching it at least, is what I'm interested in doing. I'm not going to figure it out, but that's the storyline that excites me that I'm following.
Okay, Sam, you have a book or a big project coming out, or perhaps?
Yeah, soon, but not right here.
Not right here.
I don't have a book to
Not
sign.
ready.
I can sign your pamphlets.
But you're working on something.
Yeah, there's a book in the works, I can say.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a very short time left, but I'm happy. Yes, let's take a question or two.
Have you written about effective altruism?
Have you written about effective altruism was the question.
Can you say more?
Well, it seems to me to be a cult that is well-funded and potentially very dangerous.
I haven't, but I will look. I'll look into it, and I'll talk to you after maybe.
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking of Benny Hinn with
Sure.
his white outfit.
Yes.
And his people who pre-qualify those who go up on stage to be sure they're going to complete
Right.
the act properly.
Yep.
Were you ever a part of that? And how many people know about that aspect of the cure?
Right. Yeah. And Benny Hinn has sort of been rehabilitated after that. He's back. He can be forgiven. So the question was about Benny Hinn, a famous faith healer of an earlier tradition, who basically pre-approved people to be cured. That doesn't happen so much anymore. But what you hear about is Facebook mining. So you get someone's profile. I haven't seen this. I didn't see any of that in my in my experience with these people. I saw much more of this like kind of cold read of a room where somebody's going to have a problem in their family, like, you know, just deep, sad human ailments that we all kind of have. Body parts not working the way they used to, you know, siblings who don't love us like they used to, what have you. But Facebook mining is the kind of social media version of that now. That is, you go find someone's Facebook profile, you dig many, many, you know, years down, you find out, oh, who is sick, who's not sick. So that's the social media version of that.
I love that you have questions. I really do, but I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap this up. But you can ask. Sam's going to be here. He's not going anywhere, so you can grab
Yes,
him
I'm
by
around,
the
yeah.
lapels outside in just a moment.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to free up the room. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks.